A couple of years ago, I made a garden bench, which turned out to be a good example of the challenge of finding simplicity, something that I've talked about in length over the years on this channel and in my monthly newsletter. It seems I'm on this continual quest to find simplicity in my woodworking projects and, well, life in general. I think as humans, we seem to be hardwired to approach any new task or endeavor from a place of complexity. By default, we want to overcomplicate things. And when it comes to woodworking, I value simplicity as a goal because I believe that simpler designs are usually more aesthetically pleasing, and fewer components typically lead to sturdier, more robust projects. Simplifying involves reductive thinking, a process that we naturally resist when we consider building something, which is an additive process. As an exercise in exploring simplicity, I've been writing a series of haiku poems, each paired with a photograph. I post these over on my Instagram account as Instagram stories. And while traditional Japanese haiku is more focused on describing nature or the seasons, I've adopted a kind of a broader, more liberal approach to include topics pertaining to just life's moments. I like the challenge of haiku because it's typically 17-syllable format. Usually the first and third lines contain 5 syllables and the middle line has 7. Okay, stay with me here. So the parameters of construction are defined and constrained. The craft lies in starting with a broad idea and paring it down to reveal its essence. Okay, real quickly, here's an example. So the idea here is the fleeting nature of life represented by the brief life of a poppy. But as I explored this, I realized that maybe beauty exists because it can be lost. The constraints of the 17-syllable format forced me to find the essence and emotional undercurrent. I eliminated all articles and placed a single verb directly in the middle. And since nothing connects the last 2 words, I was able to make them sound similar yet hold opposite meanings. 2 sides of the same coin. This is the same process we could use when designing or building woodworking projects. So to get back to my garden bench, I begin by considering the parameters of function. 1, I want a casual bench to nestle into a secluded part of my garden. It's not intended for spending hours sitting on, only a few minutes at a time to relax and enjoy the springtime blooms and listen to birds and whatever traffic I can hear. 2, it needs to be sturdy enough to withstand the elements for, say, a decade without any maintenance. And 3, since this is a Woodworking for Mere Mortals project, I want it to be affordable, approachable, and easy to build with a limited set of power tools. So as common wisdom suggests, form follows function. So now I can begin to design based on those 3 constraints. So I start to narrow down those 3 things. First, that little secluded area is small and the bench will most likely only contain 1 butt at a time, but a single person bench is pretty weird, so I'll design it for 2 cozy people. Since it's only going to be used for short periods of time, back support isn't necessary. This simplifies the design and it appeals to function number 3, making it a suitable project for a beginning woodworker to tackle. Secondly, durability is probably the biggest consideration for any outdoor project. And so to meet this function, I need to account for the effects of water. This means reducing areas that might accumulate moisture and, concealing as much of the end grain as possible. To ensure maximum weather protection, I'll paint the bench with an exterior latex house paint. Since it's going to be a painted project, I can keep costs down by using just construction grade 2x4 studs. These will also make it really hefty and stable, and using just 2x4s allows me to design a project that only requires crosscuts. No rip cuts are necessary. It can be made with just a miter saw or a circular saw. So this is a pretty good start in defining a project that's affordable, durable, and easy to make, but that's not necessarily a recipe for simplicity. So with all of these parameters in place, 17 syllables of woodworking, I began designing the seat. My first thought was to just use 4 boards side by side. That seems pretty simple. I put them face up with spaces between them. That's about as basic as you could get, but is it simple? Maybe I could connect them together with a dowel, but how would I drill a hole all the way through the width of each board? I could make some 2x4 end caps to kind of cap off those ends, but how would I attach those with their faces up, especially in a beginner-friendly way? Plus, they would be a weak spot, and you would most likely just break it off if you sat on them. I guess I could attach them edges up, but it would look odd unless I also attached some sort of front and rear of the seat, sort of like a skirt. And then the more I thought about this design, I realized that, well, this is gonna be a real challenge to attach the legs and to make them sturdy. So I just figured this whole idea was pretty flawed and unworkable. A better solution would be to tip the studs on their edges. This would still promote airflow and water drainage while reducing horizontal surface space. This also makes it look more like a traditional slatted park bench. I still really like the idea of joining the boards together with dowels to make the seat. So orienting the studs this way makes it easier to drill holes through the faces of the boards that dowels can slide through. This also allows for screws to be driven up into them from the underside of the seat to secure them in place. Also, having them underneath hides the screws and it keeps them away from water to help reduce rusting. So now, all I need to do is easily cap off the ends of each board with shorter boards, making for fewer exposed end grain surfaces. So this seat idea was looking pretty good. So now it's the important matter of making legs to support this pretty heavy seat. 4 single 2x4s on their ends are more than adequate to hold the downward force. It's the side-to-side racking that needs to be addressed, and this is where I spent most of the time on the design, starting with really some of the most convoluted ideas. First, I thought it would be cool to have the legs attached to the dowels somehow, and have the dowel run through the legs and then through the seat. But this led to a series of problems. First, the end grain would just be blatantly exposed to rain and God and everything else. Plus, how would I attach the cutaway parts of the slats? Would I use more dowels? Or screw them into the legs with pocket holes? The deeper and deeper I considered this line of thinking, the more complicated it all became. The solution to one problem required modifying something else. Plus, when it came down to it, the front-facing 2x4 legs just kind of looked odd. So then I kind of thought that the legs might look cool if they were just set into notches. This is a pretty sleek design, and it would certainly give the bench side-to-side strength. But then I faced the problem of the dowel again. Would I position it at the seam? I would have to either make the notch shallower, or I'd have to raise the dowel higher. Plus, this seems kind of weak if the bench racked frontward and backward. Those legs might just break off. But all of this was just violating my third parameter. The project needs to be beginner friendly without a lot of tools. And making those notches would not be simple and would definitely require more than just a miter saw. So I sat on all of this for a while and kept coming back to it and reminding myself to try to find simplicity. And this may be a trade-off with style, but I felt like function was a little bit more weighted in this case. Nobody wants to have a bench crash when they sit down on it. The key turned out to turn the bench over and start to consider it from the underside, looking at it from this angle rather than the top. What if I added a frame for the legs to attach to? By still using 2x4s on their edges, you can easily bore wide holes halfway through using a Forstner bit. Then you can use 2-inch screws or whatever to attach it from the underside. This would be a pretty simple method that wouldn't require you to use 6-inch long screws. Plus, with the screws in those larger holes, they're protected from water. And if you wanted to, you could even plug those holes with dowels. And then with that T-shaped frame in place, it's just a simple matter of screwing the legs into place. And as an added benefit, the legs can be set back a little bit from the edge, which makes them less obtrusive and makes the whole design a little bit more elegant. This system is super sturdy, and the legs look better with their edges forward rather than their faces forward. So ultimately, I came up with a design that functions well and is pretty easy to build with inexpensive materials. It's a bench that's stable in all directions, and it'll last for a long time. Now, of course, the biggest compromise is form. Aesthetically, the leg assembly looks a little chunky, but when the bench is upright and you're looking down on it, it doesn't really feel that way. It doesn't bother me. So I realize some people are gonna worry that the end grain on those legs, the part that's touching the ground, is just gonna soak up water and the legs are gonna rot. And while this is true, it's a compromise. By sealing them with exterior latex house paint, I can extend their lifespan. But remember, one of my goals was to build a bench to last about a decade without any maintenance. This will probably last that long, probably longer. I'm really not interested in making an heirloom piece for the garden, especially using 2x4 studs. But what I like best about this is the main feature of the bench, and this is why I call it the springtime garden bench, is its bright paint. I wanted it to provide a dramatic, unexpected splash of color and a dash of whimsy to the garden. And that's what people notice and comment on, not the leg assembly. This really is an expression of happiness in 17 syllables. All right, look, it's easy to write a poem using too many adjectives and too many ideas or too many words. And it's easy to start a woodworking project with too many boards or too many router profiles and too many components. Adding things, addition always feels productive. Restraint feels risky somehow. Our culture teaches us to want more, and that simplicity is somehow a sign of a lack of effort or even a failure to grow. But craftsmanship is never about how much you can add, but knowing what you can remove. A haiku doesn't try to explain life, but offers a moment to just pause. A poppy doesn't try to last, it just wants to briefly share its beauty. And a bench doesn't need to be any more than just a place to rest. Over time, its paint will fade, the wood will move, and it'll rot. Eventually, it'll return to the garden it sits in. And maybe we can approach a lot of things in 17 syllables, or just a few humble 2x4s. And by the way, if you'd like to build that springtime garden bench, I have plans available over at Shop WWMM. There's a link down in the description. Thanks for watching, everybody.